key things to focus on that correlate back to your symptoms. So you'll also fill out like an intake form. So I have, information on like, what are you dealing with? What supplements are you taking? What's your diet? What's your lifestyle? So I can make it as personalized as possible, of course. So many minerals are depleted from birth control. So like B vitamins, zinc, vitamin E, magnesium, like there's just so many vitamins out there that are depleted from birth control. And because they're so impactful for every single cell in the body, this is the number one test I'd recommend to you for starting if you just want some personalized plan. Hello, welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast for women looking to have a safe transition off birth control and heal their hormones naturally. We are just finishing out the snowmageddon that happened here in Ohio that affected tons and tons of people across the US. So our road just got plowed yesterday. So I have been bundling up and embracing the just staying at home, and I got a couple books before this happened. So it's been nice just to relax and almost give you an excuse to do nothing. So that was our weekend, and now just kind of getting back in the swing of things. And I'm excited to record this podcast because the goal of today is I really wanted to record an episode to give women some clarity of how to have direction, whether you're stopping birth control or you're looking to heal specific symptoms after birth control, or birth control is not part of your story, but you're just looking for some guidance on like, what labs do I need? What testing do I need done? And what kind of support would be the most helpful based on where I'm at? So like I said, this is applicable for not only women who want support coming off of birth control and they want more than just stop and see what happens, just quit and see what happens, like, because that's the recipe for disaster. And that might have happened to you before, that you might have seen that happen with your friends, or that might be something where you were put on birth control for a reason other than pregnancy prevention, let's say painful periods, for example, or acne. And you're like, okay, well, how do I, like, you're smart. You know that those symptoms are going to come back because birth control didn't fix the problem. So you're like, well, what do I do to prevent that? And no one can really give you any answers. Or if you just want some support with healing your hormones that doesn't involve suppressing those signals, aka using birth control or other Band-Aid medications, and you really want some guidance on how to clear those up naturally. So whether you've had one lingering symptom or you've been stuck for years, this is the episode for you. And this is something that I personally know is very overwhelming because there's so much conflicting advice out there and random supplements. There's no clear roadmap how to stop birth control. And I am very open about this, obviously. I mean, this is why I started my business, but I quit birth control cold turkey without knowing any different. And that is what led me to deal with post-birth control syndrome, which I'm actually recording another episode about, specifically post-birth control syndrome, what that is and how to reverse that. I'm going to be releasing that in a couple of weeks after this one. But that's what led me to deal with post-birth control syndrome, which essentially it looks different for everyone, but for me, it involved chronic breakouts that were all over my face and left my confidence in the toilet. It was sky-high anxiety that no therapy or anxiety medication could touch. And it was an anovulatory period despite eating healthy and exercising and taking all the right supplements. So there's just a lot of, there's a lack of information from medical providers of how to stop birth control and alternative routes to heal your hormones without suppressing them on birth control. And there's also an overwhelming information of like people who are out there who are saying, well, let's do something differently, or here, try this, do that. It can be very overwhelming. And it's, with all of my coaching programs, regardless of where you're at in your journey, all of them include some sort of testing, because that is what is going to make this personalized to you. And that's what's going to cut through the noise and make it crystal clear of what types of foods you need to focus on, what supplements you need to be taking. Because I don't know about you, but I had a supplement graveyard of all of these supplements for like healing my gut and balancing my hormones that I didn't even need, that I was just throwing money away getting out of desperation, quite frankly, and not having clear direction. So I'm going to be tying in, that said, I'm going to be tying in my coaching programs into all of this to show you strategically, if you've been thinking about maybe getting some support for a while, or maybe you've been following me for a while and you're like, okay, I want to work with her, but I'm not quite sure what I need or what would be the right fit. Which, first and foremost, if that's you, just schedule a free call or DM me on Instagram and we can just have an open conversation. Like, literally no pressure. My job isn't to sell you. My job is 100% just to support you and help you decide what is the most helpful program for you at this point in time. And if you want to hop on a call, we can certainly do that. You can fill out the application and the link in the show notes. So if that's you, just feel free to DM me and we can have a no pressure conversation about it. Or if you're newer to me and you're listening to this and you're like, I didn't even realize these services were out there. I didn't even realize that, I should be doing this before coming off of birth control, or the tests that you're mentioning are things that I've never heard of before. First of all, hopefully that makes you excited and hopefully that makes you feel hopeful, because the tests that I run are so different than what your typical doctor's visit or OB. Even a lot of functional writers are not running the labs that I'm running. And that's why I have such success, or my clients have such success with this program and my coaching programs, because we're not only running the right labs, and we're running different targeted labs specifically to transition off birth control and get to the root of hormone symptoms like painful, irregular periods, mood swings, anxiety, acne naturally. But you're also getting a personalized plan. So there's never any cookie cutter, here's what I give to every single client. All of my clients can attest to this. It's so personalized and so individualized. And that is where you see success, not just a take all these supplements and hope for the best, or, surface level labs that don't really go deeper. This is where customization truly shines and truly gets you those results, and not just results faster, but results that last. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but my point of this is I'm going to be tying in as we go through to help you, through this maze and get a clear direction of what labs you need first and foremost, and what type of support might be helpful based on your symptoms, where you're at, what you're looking for. Also tying that into how I can help support you if that is something you are looking for, if you want an expert in your corner guiding you, and if you want to get these labs run, I would be very honored to support you. And maybe it's not now, maybe it's just something you're kind of thinking about, and you can reach out or come back to this episode in the future as well. Person I'm going to be speaking to is, maybe you're newer to this, right? So maybe you're newer along in your healing journey. You're not really aware of functional nutrition, which, by the way, what functional nutrition essentially is, or functional medicine, you might have heard of that, or holistic medicine, is where we're looking at the root causes. So we're not just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms. We're getting to the root of, why are you having painful periods pop up every single month that are debilitating and making you miss work? Why are you having sky-high anxiety all the time? It's not, that therapy can't touch, anxiety medication isn't working for. Why are you having chronic skin conditions like acne, contact dermatitis, eczema, psoriasis, versus just take a steroid cream and call it a day, or just try and treat it topically? We're looking at the underlying factors that are leading to those symptoms. So that's, in a nutshell, what functional nutrition, functional medicine is. But maybe you're newer to that. Maybe you are at this point where you've been failed a couple of times, or you've just kind of maybe heard rumblings on like TikTok or social media from friends about a different way, and your eyes are kind of just now being open to like, oh, well, I didn't realize like it wasn't normal to just have painful periods all the time. So you're a little bit newer along in your journey and you want a bit of guidance, but you're not quite to the point where you want to jump all in or you want like a long-term investment. You don't want like a ton of information. You just kind of want like a starter plan of like, let me get my feet wet. Let me get some information, and you're very motivated. You don't necessarily want or need hand-holding or long-term support. And perhaps you have one main symptom and it's not super severe, right? So maybe it's like, I'll just keep going with the period example. Maybe it's like I have painful periods, but they're not ruining my day, right? Like my life doesn't revolve around them. And you're able to live your life as, pretty much as normal versus someone who's like the example I gave earlier, just curled up in the fetal position and has to call off work for the week every single month. So you want a little bit of support with one specific symptom. And, before I move further, with everything, right? This is why I have different support options, because symptoms are multifaceted. So most of the time, there's not just going to be one thing, but that's why I was very strategic with how I set up my coaching programs, which I'll talk about. But all that being said, you have one question you want clarity on, and one symptom you want more information on, and a clear plan without much handholding, without a long-term investment or a long-term coaching relationship. You might feel overwhelmed, and you want to know like what specific foods to focus on and what supplements you should or should not be taking. So this is where my birth control reset comes in. And this is one powerful test. This is the hair tissue mineral analysis. And the HTMA is the one test, if I had to choose one test, which is why I created the reset, the one test that I would recommend anyone running when they're experiencing any type of hormone symptom or when they're thinking about transitioning off birth control, it would be the hair tissue mineral analysis, because minerals run the body. They're important for every single cell in our body. So they're important for metabolic function, for your thyroid. They're important for skin. They're important for preventing inflammation, and for some have antioxidant capacity, like selenium, for example. And so minerals are just key to every single system, and it's oftentimes something that goes it doesn't get the it does more now, but it really doesn't get the credit that it deserves. I mean, even gut stuff, like you need sodium for ample stomach acid, which is important for breaking down food. And so I've had clients who have had chronic digestion issues, and we run a GI map on them, and it's very clean. There's not a lot of overgrowth. Their good bacteria looks good, but their stomach acid is really low because they're really deficient in certain minerals like sodium. And so when we focus on mineral replenishment alone, a lot of people see results very, very quickly with that. So that's why the HTMA is so helpful. And the reason I do an HTMA, the hair tissue mineral analysis, which is a hair sample versus blood levels of your minerals, is because it shows 3 months worth of data. And it also is showing us what's happening inside the cell versus blood labs show what's happening outside the cell. And it's very variable. So blood is that moment in time, and it's very variable, and it's not giving us a good picture of what's happening inside the cell. Versus the HTMA is 3 months worth of data, what's happening inside the cell, which, for example, certain minerals like potassium, 90% of it resides inside the cell. And it's not as variable versus the blood. So it also will give us key data on certain body systems. That's my favorite part of the test, and how minerals are interacting. Because, for example, calcium and magnesium are synergistic. So are potassium and sodium. Some are antagonistic. So we want to see the whole picture, and also how different systems are being impacted. So you can get really good data about, I mentioned gut health, stomach acid, heavy metals, your nervous system. Are you in constant fight or flight, or are you burnt out? Your adrenal health and your thyroid, for example. So it can give us so much data from a small sample of your hair over a 3-month span, which is so, so helpful. So the birth control reset comes with the hair tissue mineral analysis, which, like I said, it's super easy. You do it at home. I literally mail the test to you. you don't leave your house. You just have someone cut your hair and you get clear directions on how to do that. It's about like a tablespoon of hair. It's not that much. And then you mail it. It's snail mail. So it's USPS. You mail that back. I get the data. And then after I get your results, I provide you a video review going through every single part of the test and key things to focus on that correlate back to your symptoms. So you'll also fill out like an intake form. So I have, information on like, what are you dealing with? What supplements are you taking? What's your diet? What's your lifestyle? So I can make it as personalized as possible, of course. So all of that information is explained in the video assessment. And that's also really helpful because, actually with all of my programs, I provide a video assessment when I'm going through the labs because I used to do live lab reviews, but I found that they're really overwhelming and people like to go back to them. They like to go back and rewatch. And that way they have that to, some people need to digest a little bit, or some people like in a couple months, they're like, oh yeah, like I want to go back and like listen to this part again. So I send a video of all of that stuff. So you actually know what's going on. And that's really, really important for me because I want people to know and be informed on their body. That's a core value of mine in my business is I want women to be informed about their health because so many of us for so many years have just been told like that's just a part of being a woman. Your only option is to go on birth control or to get a hysterectomy or to grin and bear it, and that's just not true. And that's because the medical system is not built. There's just a lack of information and education out there about women's health. And that's not the fault of the doctors. That's just how the system is at this point right now. And it's very much based on like pharmaceuticals. So it is what it is. But all that being said, it's very important for me for women to be informed about their health and like what's going on in their body so that they can be confident and they can be educated and they can make decisions based on that information. So you'll get that expert analysis to understand exactly what's going on, and then you'll get a personalized starter protocol based on your HTMA. So this is what foods to focus on based on what minerals you might be deficient in, what, if you have any heavy metals, like what binders would be helpful with that. I never do restriction or avoidance of any particular foods. That's just not necessary and frankly misguided. So it's more about like what can you add? And a lot of times I'm giving people guidance on like beefing up their diet, right? Because so many women are chronically underfueling themselves. And so that's also something that I talk a lot about is if you're skipping breakfast. I just did a reset review last week and she was skipping breakfast, having lunch and having dinner and like no snacks. And I was like, the reason you're having fatigue and you're having acne and you're having PCOS symptoms is because your blood sugar is dysregulated. Like that's a huge thing I see even without looking at your HTMA. And then we look at the HTMA and we look at, there's a ratio to show blood sugar markers if you have like tendency for high or low blood sugar, and hers was tendency for low blood sugar. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. I bet if we ran some blood labs, it would show your insulin is elevated and your glucose fasting is elevated, which is when I see those together means that there's chronic blood sugar dysregulation. And that's going to lead to a whole host of symptoms and just feeling absolutely awful, to be quite honest. So the biggest thing you can do is making sure your diet is up to par and making sure you're eating enough throughout the day. So I'm not only giving you like what foods to eat, what supplements to take, but it's also lifestyle modifications and saying like, let's eat with it now waking up. Here are some examples based on like the 24-hour recall you gave me in your intake form. Because I want it to be realistic for you, especially since we're not going to be working one-on-one in the reset. There is no long-term coaching. It's a DIY plan. I want to make for sure that it's something you can tailor based on the information I provide. So that was my last point. There's no, at this point, you might not be looking for that long-term commitment. So the birth control reset is for someone who just wants that starting plan, as well as no long-term commitment, no coaching relationship. I do give people the opportunity to email me for a week after getting their results with any quick questions, because I want them to be able to have that space to do that. But that's what the reset provides. And I have so many clients who they're like, this is so great because I just wanted some direction, right? Like I just wanted some information from an expert. I didn't want a cookie cutter plan, or I didn't want something that was just like a laundry list of like, you could have these, this could be the problem. Here are like some supplement options. No, this is like tailored to like exactly what you need. And the brands of supplements that I recommend, the dosages that I recommend based on your symptoms, your goals, and your HTMA results. One note with this is that sometimes I talked all about how the HTMA gives us so much good data. Sometimes there are things on there that I would need additional labs to fully assess what's going on. For example, if someone has really low copper and really high zinc on the HTMA. From clinical experience, doing so many of these labs at this point for several years, I know that can be one of two things. That can be a chronic copper deficiency and usually low zinc, so low copper, low zinc, because when zinc is high in the HTMA, it means we're burning through it versus too much of it. Or it could mean that we have low zinc, again, burning through it most likely, and low bioavailable copper, but we might have too much free copper in the body, which when we have too much free copper, it causes inflammation. Both low and high copper can cause problems, and low zinc can cause problems like mood problems, inflammation, joint fatigue, the list goes on and on. But that's where I tell people, I'm like, I would need functional blood labs in combination with the HTMA to fully assess what's going on here. And some clients decide to upgrade to the Accelerator to get those blood labs done, to get that full picture, or some people choose just to go with the data that they have and try out the protocol. And a lot of times it's enough, and then sometimes it's not, and they come back and they want to get those additional labs done in the future. But I will always be transparent about that because, one lab test is not going to, and this is why I'm being very specific about who these offers and who these programs and labs are for. Because if you've been dealing with something for, years, or you stop birth control and you have acne and you have painful periods and you have anxiety that's to the roof, one lab is not going to be enough. I mean, it's going to give you some data. It's better than nothing. But this is where again, I wanted to create this episode so you could help determine like what program is the best fit. What do you actually need in this moment? So I will always be transparent if I think that additional testing would be helpful and what that testing would be. And I always give clients the opportunity to upgrade to get more of that testing, more support, because the more tests we run, the more we're going to uncover. Like it is what it is, right? So the more we uncover, the longer the relationship needs to be, because we're going to be tackling things one by one. I'm not going to give you a protocol to do all these different things. So again, strategy. So anyways, I'll always offer them the opportunity to upgrade to get that additional support if they would like in that additional testing. So if you want clarity without coaching, this is the best first step. And one thing I forgot to mention, or maybe didn't make clear too, is like if you want more than just a generic cookie cutter multivitamin protocol to transition off birth control, I also recommend the reset because so many minerals are depleted from birth control. So like B vitamins, zinc, vitamin E, magnesium, like there's just so many vitamins out there that are depleted from birth control. And because they're so impactful for every single cell in the body, this is the number one test I'd recommend to you for starting if you just want some personalized plan. The next step up from that is the woman who maybe has multiple symptoms. So, or they're a little bit more severe, right? And they want some expanded testing and a clear plan and a little bit of one-on-one support. But again, they're not quite ready or not quite interested in a longer term commitment, okay? And they want timing and data and prep support and a little bit of expert support in their corner to help them get there. So this is where my Accelerator comes in. And the birth control breakup Accelerator, this is a 6-week program, and you get the HTMA. So all of these programs have the HTMA because it's so important. The HTMA plus one additional lab depending on your goals. So this Accelerator, to figure out what additional lab you get, it's based on your symptoms and your goals. So there's 3 targeted tracks that I've developed to determine which test would be the most helpful. So there's a gut and a skin track. And this is for someone who has like bloating, diarrhea, constipation, acne, psoriasis, eczema. And this includes a GI map, which is a comprehensive stool analysis, because the gut is so, so important. I mean, it's important for like everything, but for skin stuff and for obviously gut symptoms, we want to assess what the microbiome is looking like, if there's any overgrowth of bad bacteria, too low levels of good bacteria, any inflammation, digestive issues. So you get the HTMA plus the GI map. The other two tracks are HTMA plus functional blood labs. And these are not the average blood labs that your doctor is running. So the other two tracks are going to be the painful periods track and the anxiety and PMS track. So the functional blood labs are going to include targeted labs like copper. I've mentioned that a couple of times. So copper, because if someone has really painful periods or a lot of anxiety, for example, a lot of times I'll see that they have really high levels of copper. Or for anxiety, it could be low levels of copper too, because it's such an important nutrient that needs to be in balance. And if it's not, then it can cause inflammation. It can cause a lot of symptoms. We'll also look at detox pathways. So with the gut and skin track, we'll look at, we'll get some information for detox. The HTMA can also give us a little bit of info about like detox, potentially just looking at sulfur. But with the functional blood labs, we'll look at liver enzymes. We'll look at bilirubin, which is essentially is your gallbladder function. So we'll look at detoxification on a much more like through a microscope, essentially. We'll dive deeper into that. And then we'll do a full iron panel. So not just a ferritin, not just a serum iron. This is looking at a full iron panel, because another big factor of inflammation is poor iron recycling or iron overload. And this can lead to chronic inflammation, which can lead to anxiety. It can lead to painful periods or heavy periods, and not something that a lot of people are assessing. So those are just a snippet of the blood labs. I mean, it's a whole lot of blood labs. And so I want to share a couple like client examples with this to put this into like reality with the different tracks. So one of my clients who joined the gut and the skin track noticed less bloating and calmer skin within weeks after implementing her personalized protocol. And she was someone who she was in between VIP and the Accelerator. VIP was like the highest touch, my 5-month coaching container, which we'll talk about next. But she was in between those, and she was like, let's just start with the Accelerator. And then, like I said, I always give clients the option to upgrade if they would like to later on. So we started with that, and we uncovered she had low stomach acid, low levels of good bacteria. She had she had low mineral status across the board. So I created her a customized protocol to get that bacteria up with a targeted probiotic. So not just like any probiotic. We want to make sure we're taking the right probiotic for us. And then also foods to help rebuild the microbiome. And then specific nutrients that she needed most based on her HTMA, as well as support, both food and supplement, to help with stomach acid. So she started seeing wins with her digestion right away. And acne usually takes longer, but she did get a consistent period. That was another thing she was concerned about, is after stopping birth control, and so we quickly identified she wasn't eating enough. And so I gave her specific lifestyle modifications. And we talked about like modifying her exercise, giving herself more nervous system regulation, more rest, eating more carbs and fats. So really customize it to fit her lifestyle in a way that felt doable. You also get, with a little bit of one-on-one support, that's the lab stuff, but you get the two functional labs, the HTMA plus the GI map or the functional blood, depending on your track. And then you get some one-on-one support. So we'll start off with a kickoff call, a 75-minute deep dive assessment to connect, talk even more about your lifestyle, your symptoms, what you've tried, what hasn't worked, what's worked. Just so much stuff. I mean, I asked you way too many questions about your life. So we do that. And then once I get your labs back, you have that customized protocol, and you get 6 weeks of private chat support with me. That way, as you're implementing, you have an expert in your corner, but it's not a long-term commitment. So it's like you have that chat where as you're implementing, as you're starting it, you can ask questions. So for example, a big one that comes up a lot is, if someone starts having a reaction to a supplement. So that's where the one-on-one support or the private chat support can be helpful. I had a client just last week. This doesn't always happen, but I would say because my clients are coming to me and they are just so depleted and, their body just needs support. And so there can sometimes be a reaction to supplements. And for example, this client started a probiotic because she had really low levels of good bacteria. And she messaged me and she was like, my gut was doing really well. And then I added this. And I just started feeling like really bloated and having some more diarrhea. And I was like, okay, like, here's what that means. I've seen that before. Let's pause that for a couple days until your stomach normalizes again. And then let's like go back in, but with 1 cap instead of 2 caps every other day and see how that feels and let me know. And then we'll titrate up from there and kind of see where your threshold is. So those are examples of like, where that support as you're implementing can come into play. Or if you're having like an acne flare and you want some additional support of like, what could this be? It can be helpful. Another client story I want to share is someone who did the acne and PMS anxiety and PMS track of the Accelerator. This is one of my favorite stories. So when she started with me, she was, let me actually pull up. I'm going to share below too in the show notes. I did some Instagram posts about these case studies. So if you want to see like the labs we run specifically and even more of a deep dive, I'm just giving a very brief overview here of this. But if you want to go even deeper into like what we did, the lab results and stuff like that, I'm going to share their Instagram post that I did about them with their permission, of course. But this is my client, M, and every week before her period, she said everything felt unbearable. She couldn't fall asleep. She needed 3 cups of coffee just to function. And then she relied on wine or edibles at night to calm down. So she was really in this like constant state of nervous energy and anxiety. And like she was exhausted, but then she couldn't sleep, right? Which is like the worst. And she was snapping at her husband. She was snapping at her kids. She just felt, and then she would like cry in the bathroom because she felt so guilty. And she was like, I just don't feel like the person who, this isn't me, essentially. But she had gone to a ton of doctors and she was newer to functional. She was like aware of it, but like hadn't worked with a functional provider before. But she had gone to her doctor, her primary care doctor, several times, and they just told her everything looked normal in her labs, which I hear all the time. And she was just advised basically like, we'll try switching your birth controls again. And so she was prescribed an antidepressant and told to switch birth controls again, but nothing helped. And so, she just really was like stuck and confused about what was going on. And so when she found me, she was like, what if my labs come back normal again? What if I spend this money and there's nothing wrong? And I told her, I was like, I've never seen that happen. And quite honestly, I have never seen that happen. If I ever do, I will be honest about that. But I always find way more imbalances. That's always more of the issue. I find way more stuff than we're expecting with the labs that I run and the way I'm looking at these labs than never finding anything at all. So I told her that. So she joined the Accelerator PMS and anxiety track. And what we found was functional folate deficiency depression, which doesn't respond to SSRIs, which makes sense. And it flares with hormonal shifts and worsens with stress. So bingo. So she had low B vitamins, high homocysteine, low histamine, and all of those things gave us data of like, okay, what foods do you need to be focusing on? What nutrients, what supplements to help with those deficiencies would be helpful and to help with the anxiety. Eating more is something we focused on to stabilize blood sugar, and then natural calming support to help with stress and to help with mood. And within 2 weeks of starting her protocol, she was already feeling less stressed, like within 2 weeks. Sometimes this takes longer, but for her, it was like very, very quick. So she messaged me and she was like, when she started with me, her stress was an 8 out of 10. So like 10 is hair on fire anxiety, 1 is calm as a cucumber. And then 2 weeks in, she said it was a 5 or a 4 to a 5. So it basically went in half in 2 weeks of starting her protocol. And so, this is what happens when you have the right data and the right plan. And she did message me in a month after that. And she said that she started her period and she had like 0 rage. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm like fixed within a month. After years of like going to doctors and telling people like she didn't feel good and them just being like, well, it's normal. Try different birth control or everything looks fine. And I see this all the time. So, that's another story that I just love sharing because so many women are dealing with this and they don't know what to do. So if you want to come up birth control strategically, or if you want a little bit of one-on-one support to heal your hormones or your mood, your skin, etc., this is the middle ground. This is like the middle tier of like you get some lab support, some one-on-one support. It's a good in between. Oh, and one thing I want to add before I move on is that just like with the reset, if there's anything I'm like, you need additional testing, I'll be transparent about that. Same thing with the accelerator, because like I said, the more labs we find, the more data we uncover. So if there is something in there that would require a longer term plan, for example, if we find high copper, that's a copper protocol to detox excess copper is 3 to 6 months minimum, because we want to go at that very strategically, and we want medical. I need to monitor that person, because if if they go too fast or if they have a reaction, that can make symptoms worse. That can make mental health worse. And so I want to just, for, what do you call it? Like ethics. The word is escaping me right now, but like just making sure that they're like, they need medical monitoring. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. I'm like trying to like figure out the words, but they need to work with me on a higher scale to monitor them through that. So that way things aren't getting worse. So that, or if there's any like H. pylori, or I did a reset review or a accelerator review last week, and she has candida, like a really high level of candida. And I was like, I would highly recommend eradicating this, because I know this is contributing to your symptoms. So I gave her the option to upgrade to the VIP, because we don't want to just jump into these intense protocols right away too. We want to give your body time to focus on the minerals first, to focus on replenishing, to optimizing detox pathways. And that's the other thing that I will say that makes me different, is that we are all about, as I've used this word multiple times, all about strategy here. We are not just going to go in of like, oh, like kill. It's like with gut bacteria, for example, it's like, no, we want to make for sure that your body is primed and ready and your immune system is built up, so you're not just going to get reinfected. Because if we just focus on jumping into a killing protocol, that can make things worse, and it can make it more likely that you're going to get reinfected. So we're in this for the long run. I want you to not need me in the future. So I want to make sure you get the best results as fast as possible. And I want to make for sure that they stick too. So wanted to make sure I put that in there too. All right. Last but not least, if you have been dealing with multiple longstanding symptoms, right? You might have acne, you might have a missing period, or and anxiety and fatigue. And these issues have been going on for years, not months. Maybe you're terrified to stop birth control because you were put on it for endometriosis, or you were put on it for acne and it helped a little bit, but like you're still having acne and you just know when you go off, your face is going to blow up and you just can't bear to think about that. This is also when you've maybe seen, this is the woman who's seen multiple providers. You probably have come to the functional route because you've been dismissed and you've been let down by conventional doctors, and probably still functional doctors as well. Or maybe you've been told your labs are normal and you just feel like you've been trying and just hitting walls every single time, and just being told like, go back on birth control, try this medication, try this elimination diet, and then nothing sticks. And you're ready to go all in. You're sick of feeling this way. You want a high-touch coaching relationship. You want someone in your corner every step of the way. You want all the data. You want all the labs. These tend to be the women too who like data. They like, they're the ones. I love working with women like this, because we go through their labs and stuff, and they're just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Or like, I can't wait to see what's wrong with me, which makes me excited, because again, you have answers versus just continuously being told like, nothing's wrong. When you get those answers and you're like, whoa, there's like so much wrong with me. Like, that's good, because it's in your control and you finally have a clear plan of like what to do about it. And these are the women who don't want Band-Aids, right? Like, they want to understand why this keeps happening and the tools and a crystal clear plan of how to heal their body, to heal their symptoms. So this is where my VIP coaching program comes in. So this is 5 months of high touch support. So again, it's for the woman who makes her health a priority. She's done guessing. She wants to work with the right provider who has the right plan for her and is all in and wants that expert in her corner every step of the way. And this includes all the functional lab tests that I mentioned, plus iodine analysis. So you get the HTMA, the hair tissue mineral analysis, the GI map, the functional blood labs, plus a urine iodine loading test, because iodine is so important for hormone balance. It's important for detoxification, such an important nutrient for skin. It's never talked about, and it's so important. So you get all 4 of those tests, and you get 5 months of high touch support. So you're never left guessing or Googling. You have me to chat message or to meet with frequently to ask questions, support you along the way. Again, you're done guessing. You have that expert with you every single point in your healing journey. And like I said, as we do these labs, the more we uncover. So this longer term relationship gives us time to go step by step. And so normally with people at my VIP coaching, we usually have anywhere from like 2 to 4 phases of treatment. So phase 1 might be targeted mineral replenishment. And then it might be, we have, this kind of goes into my case study here in a second, but then we might have a parasite that we eradicate. And then we might have an iodine protocol that we go through to replenish iodine. So all of those things, we don't want to just do all of that at one time. It would be impossible, and it wouldn't be helpful for your body at that time, nor is that going to be like realistic. Like that would just be a lot to mentally handle. So we are really trying to think of a different word than strategic, because I keep saying that, but we are really intentional about having these different phases of healing, and we adjust as your body responds. So sometimes I have a VIP coaching client who we started an H. pylori protocol, and her body just did not respond well. Like she started having really bad periods, and she started breaking out again. Her acne had been relatively clear. And so that was a sign that her body wasn't ready for that. So we're not just going to like push our bodies. We want to listen to our body's signals. So working with someone longer term and having more high touch support can be helpful, because it's not just about like having a plan. It's about real life implementation and responding and listening to your body based on what it's telling you. And so sometimes it needs more time in a particular phase, and that's okay. And so my VIP coaching gives you that space to intentionally, phase different levels of healing in and adjust as your body responds and as it needs time. Because some people, it's smooth sailing, right? Like they start the H. pylori protocol and they're totally fine. I would say more often than not, that's the case, because we are intentional about the prep work. But there are some cases where it's like, maybe they're like really depleted. Maybe this client had mold exposure before. And so there's times where it's just, we need to like back off, and we need to go back to the drawing board and just change things up or change the order, and that's okay. And then, this is where we really get to implement my signature framework. So my signature framework is analyze, uncover, customize, refine. All of the Accelerator and the Reset have the analyze, because you either do the intake form or you have the 75-minute initial call with me. So we're analyzing lifestyle, food, past history, symptoms, etc. And then the uncovering is the targeted labs, and the customization is the personalized plan. But you don't have the opportunity to refine it really, because you're just getting an initial plan, and we don't have that long of a time together. So the VIP is where we add on that 4th piece of the framework, which is the refinement, which is what I just described. And a client I want to share is, I love working with her. She might be listening to this, but this is my client, Jenna. She verified I can use her name, but I'm going to drop her case study too, so you can check out her skin photos. Her skin wins after just 3 weeks. And again, not all the time, I'm giving some examples that happen really quickly just for the sake of giving examples. Sometimes it takes longer, but a lot of times you can see really major wins after dealing with symptoms for years when you get the right plan and the right labs run. So She came to me with scratchy, painful contact dermatitis on her hands, and she just felt like inflamed. Her and I had actually worked together several years ago with her relationship on food. This was before I was in the functional nutrition space and, was working with eating disorders. But she and I, I'd worked together before, so she already had that trust built, and she was like, I know you know what you're doing. And she was like, now that you're in this area of nutrition, like I want to work with you on this, because she had stopped birth control. She was having heavy, painful periods, and she was having a lot of fatigue, and she just felt inflamed all the time. You can even see with her pictures, like her inflammation in her hands. You see the contact dermatitis, but then you see the generalized inflammation, just like puffiness in her hands. And she felt like that all across her body. And so she had worked with several providers before. She had seen a naturopathic doctor. She was getting weekly acupuncture and lymphatic massage. She was trying all these different supplements under the book for her, or in the book for gut, hormones, skin, adrenals, all this kind of stuff, but nothing was like touching it. And she didn't understand why her symptoms kept coming up. So we ran all 4 of those labs, and we uncovered she was super depleted in minerals. So she was a fast 4 on the HTMA. And if you don't know what that means, essentially that means you're as stressed out as you could be. You're in fight or flight, almost to the point of burnout. And so her minerals were so depleted. And we also found she had a parasite, and her iodine was really, really low. So it was 62.7% excretion. I want to see it above 90% excretion. So we are when I made this post, we were in phase 1 of her treatment, because I made this like pretty soon after, because I wanted to show her skin wins. We had just started with mineral replenishment, and now the last time we met, we started implementing her parasite protocol to get rid of that parasite. And then after that, we're going to go into iodine. So she right away saw improvements with her skin just with focusing on mineral replenishment alone. And her period was still heavy and a little bit painful, but not as painful. So I was like, well, that makes sense. We still have inflammation from the parasite. And then iodine is really, really big in helping with painful periods. So I was like, those are things that we're going to tackle, in the next several months together. So this is an example of someone who she had seen a ton of people. She had been doing all the things. She's very invested in her health. She views her health as a long-term investment. She was ready to get support. And she wanted all the data. And she wanted that high-touch coaching relationship. So if you feel like that's who you are and you want someone to finally help you connect the dots and you want someone in your corner every step of the way, then VIP coaching and getting all those functional lab tests that I described are the ticket to that. So just as a recap, to give you kind of like a self checklist of like, where do I start? Again, you're welcome to schedule a call with me. You're welcome to DM me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, at Nourished by Tay. The link is in the bio, or in the in the bio. The link is in the description, in the show notes. Welcome to message me, and you can tell me what's going on, and we can just talk about like what options there are and what we think is the best fit. But I want you to ask yourself, do you have one symptom or do you have many? Have you tried a bunch of things before, or are you newer to your healing journey? Or maybe you're just kind of like starting out. What are you looking for in a coaching relationship? I ask this to potential clients. I'm like, what are you looking for in a coaching relationship? Do you want a longer term support system, or are you looking for more of a DIY plan? And are you maybe prepping to stop birth control, or you're reacting after stopping birth control, or, how long have you been dealing with these symptoms for? I want to reinforce all of these programs are helpful. More support doesn't always equal better. It just depends on like what kind of support you're looking for and what fits your goals and your unique needs at this point in time. So this is something that if you are looking for support, I would love to support you. Feel free to hop on a call or message me, as I've mentioned several times at this point. Or if you want just this information, this is a good starting point. Like I said in the beginning of this episode, if you want to come back to this when you're in more of a space to invest in coaching or get the labs run, then that's okay too. I hope this was helpful to give you a starting point, to give you some information. My goal is to always help you choose a level of support that actually fits where you are. Okay. All that being said, thank you so much for listening. And If you haven't yet, I would really, really appreciate if you are an avid listener or if you're new here, if you wouldn't mind just hitting like giving a quick review or rating of the show. It really helps pump this out to more people, especially with all these like, if you're on social media, you get it, like the algorithms and stuff like that. There's just something funky happening right now. So the more that I have your support to get this information out, I know that so many women need this. I know that so many women don't know that this exists. So if you can just take a brief moment and leave a 5-star review, leave a review on iTunes, on iTunes, or leave a comment on the YouTube video, wherever you're watching this, it would mean so, so much to me. And until next time, stay nourished, friends.